We should be fine.
Hello and welcome back to Couture Chronicles. If you're new here, my name is Daisy and I'm attempting to make the most sparkly, fantasy, dreamy dresses that I can just waft around in because I definitely can't afford to buy anything like this. Last episode I was finishing up all the slightly boring but also really important jobs in preparation for making the final dress. If you haven't seen that yet, you can check that out right here. And if you're new to the series and want to start at the very beginning, here's a link for you. And now that is all done, there is nothing else to procrastinate on. I do actually have to face the fear and start cracking on with the final dress. So, without further ado, let's dive into today's episode where I cut into the most expensive fabric I've ever bought in my life. Honestly, I can't explain to you how scared I am about messing this up. Wish you luck. Right, so last episode I wrapped the fabric around this pole in a desperate attempt to try and get the creases out so that I can cut the pattern without too much distortion. I am pleased to announce that it definitely worked. I don't know if you can see in the video, but in person it's made a big difference to the amount of creases, so I am very happy. Another issue with thin, slippery fabrics like this silk is that the mere act of picking the fabric up to put scissors underneath to cut can be enough to pull and distort the fabric in weird ways. And I have had it in the past, once I finished cutting out my pattern piece, that the cut line can be really wibbly. So to combat this, what I've got for myself is a rotary cutter and a mat so that I don't have to pick the fabric up. I've never used a rotary cutter before, so I'm testing it out first on the ribbon, which is really handy because it sounds silly, but it did take me a couple of maneuvers to get the knack of it. Here we go. So I'm starting with the top pattern piece, cutting that first. I wanted to cut the whole pattern on the bias, but I definitely do not have enough material for that. But I am still cutting the top pattern piece on the bias, which is why you can see it's on the diagonal here, and I won't lose much fabric doing that because I can still cut out all the smaller pattern pieces from the offcuts. Anyway, top is all pinned down and I'm now using the rotary cutter to start cutting it out, and I stop halfway because I'm just halfway through cutting the first pattern piece and I realise I've got the fabric around the wrong way. So I've cut the pattern piece around the wrong way. So I'm only halfway through it and it's, do I decide to stop, turn the pattern piece around and just sack off half of that fabric? Or whether I make the bodice sit the other way. Shit. Okay, I took the plunge and I cut it all the way on the wrong side. I just spocked it up to the mannequin. I think it'll be fine, and it'll be absolutely fine. All the other pieces don't need to be a certain way apart from the train. So as long as I remember that the train also needs to be cut the wrong way, we should be fine. After all that excitement with the top pattern piece, I quickly cut out the straps and the back diamond from the excess, and then it's time to cut out the side panels. But the side panel is bigger than my dining room table, so I had to quickly sweep and scrub my dining room floor so that I could cut it on the floor without getting any muck on the silk. After the mess up with the top, I spent a long time just lying the fabric out flat, making sure that there were no creases, lining up the pattern piece meticulously before putting the pins in. Once that was all done, I had the slightly hairy job of lifting the silk up, which is what I didn't want to do, to slide the cutting mat underneath, and then I could cut it out in sections. And then once the top section was done, and I had to lift the silk up again and slide the mat further down, and I had to cut it, I think it was 3 or 4 sections in the end. And I just taking this so slowly because I really can't mess this up. I mean, the top is one thing, but these side panels are so big that if I mess up the side panels, I am done for. I am just gonna have to go out and get some more fabric. So far, so good after the initial mess up with the top pattern piece, but I quickly run into my next issue, which is this. As you can see, the twirl material for the cape is a lot wider than my silk, and there's literally nothing I can do about it because there is only a couple of centimeters of excess silk at the edge of the pattern, so I can't make it into sections and sew it together. I haven't got any more material. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to have to make my pattern thinner, and also just remembering to cut it the opposite way to make up for my mess up with the top earlier. Crumbs. A couple of heart attacks in there, but all the pattern pieces are cut out, and then what I'm doing is just very quickly with a different colour thread just marking up where all of the pleat marks from the pattern are so that they transfer onto the fabric. Before I start draping the final dress, I need to sew together the ribbon structure for underneath. Right, okay, a quick learning point. I realised that on my mock-up, the waist was in the wrong place because the waist on my dolly is not where my waist is. You can see like here on the dolly and in the mock-up, I put the waistline here where this break is, and it's a couple of inches too high. So I've measured it out, and this is where my actual waist is. So it'll be correct for the actual dress, which will help with the back as well, because if I spin her around, the waist is further down there. So I've added some more ribbon in to add support when I add the silk on, because it's very flimsy. So now the waist is there, and these top ribbons come higher up there, and they'll all attach together. I think that will work, fingers crossed. You see there's a lot more ribbon in this version than before. I think that's just to sort of add some more structure and hold it all together. And I've added these ones across here instead of adding, I had one that went across the shoulders originally, and I found when I was wearing the mock-up, it was sort of strangling me at the same time, which is obviously not a fun experience. So changed it to across. So hopefully that will give me the same, if not more, support without choking me, which would be great. I also had some excess organza, which you can use to strengthen and stiffen other fabrics. So I thought it might be useful to the structure of the dress if I used it to support the ribbons. And I've seen other YouTubers like Gunnar Deffridge and Kiana Bonolo do this technique where they map their pattern straight onto the mannequin using tape, and then they get their fabric and they smooth the fabric and pin it over the top of the tape, and then they can use those tape lines to trace onto the fabric where the pattern, how the pattern lies. So I'm attempting to do the same here, but I'm using the ribbon structures instead of tape lines to trace around. I'll pop a link to some of their videos below just so you can see what I mean. I'm using diagonal stitches to sew the organza onto the ribbon structure for a couple of reasons. One, diagonal stitches work as both temporary basting stitches because they can be easily removed if I get something wrong, but they are also strong enough to stay as permanent stitches as well. Reason two is diagonal stitches are a great stitch to prevent shifting between the organza and the ribbon, and also the darts. And option three, I think that it looks a lot prettier than just running stitch, so why not? I'm going to leave it there with the underdress all done. Join me next week where I start draping the final fabric. I am so excited. I can't wait for this all to come together. I think it's going to be gorgeous. In the meantime, keep being fabulous and I will see you next week. Bye. Into peace. Ooh. Then I can just Miss Amazing Sparkly Dream.